Hi there. In this exercise we are going to create our own little shoot 'em up game, which is going to be pretty cool. So to start off with, what we're going to do is we are going to right click on our cat and we're going to delete it, and then we are going to choose our own little background here. So I'm going to choose new backdrop, and I'm just going to choose outdoors, and I'm just going to scroll down to the bottom here. I'm going to choose the woods. Okay, so once you choose your own background, it could be any background you want. And I'm just going to click on scripts here. And what we're going to do in our little shoot 'em up game is we're going to actually have two variables this time. And we've created a scoring system before, we've created lives before, and this time in our shoot 'em up we want to get a point every time we shoot a sprite, but we also want to restrict the game with a timer, so we need to create two variables. So let's start first, and we're going to put the mechanics of the game inside the stage. So all our scoring systems and our time is going to be hidden inside the stage. So let's go to data and make a variable. And this one is going to be the score. And I'm just going to position that there. And I'm going to make a second one now. And this is going to be the timer. I'm going to pick that up now and place that just beside it like that. There we go. So we have the score and we have the timer. So let's bring in a green flag here, and we have to tell our computer when our game starts that our score is going to be 0. So the game resets itself. So we go set, and you'll see it says timer here, but we can always change that. So set the score to 0. And our game is going to be a 10-second game. So we're going to set the timer to 10. And when you press the green flag, you'll see that your timer is 10. The score is 0 and the timer is 10. And then I also want you to bring in show the timer, because at the end of our game I want my timer to hide, but at the beginning of the game, when the green flag is clicked, I want to see it. Okay, so what we need to do now is to program our timer. So our timer needs to go down. So if I was to bring in change timer by -1, connect it up, press the green flag, and you'll see that your timer changes just once, straight to -9. And that's not what we want. What we want is our timer to go down continuously, forever. So let's go to control, and let's find our forever loop here. And we want to put change timer inside our loop. So change timer by -1. And then if you press the green flag, you'll see that your timer just goes far too quickly. It's ridiculous how quickly it goes. So we're going to press stop. And the reason for that is your computer processes these instructions so quickly that it can't really handle it. But time changes every second. So what we need to do now is pick up wait 1 second, and I'm just going to put it inside this forever loop. And then you can sit back, because when I press the green flag, the score will go back, stay at 0, the timer will go back to 10, we'll be able to see the timer, and then after every second our timer will go down by 1. So press the green flag now, and as you can see, you're just programming your first timer, which is fantastic. But the problem is, your timer doesn't stop. It just keeps going and going and going. So we press stop, and we have to find a way to make the game stop at that point. So what we're going to do now is we're going to bring in an if, and I'm just going to connect it up here. It's very important now. Just leave it down here to start off with. And I want to tell the computer, if my timer equals 0, I want the game to stop. So let's go to operators, And let's bring in our equal sign. And we need to find the timer. Let's go to data. So if you can pick up timer here, if the timer equals 0, we want the game to stop. But before it stops, let's hide the timer. Let's wait for a second, and then stop. Oh, there we go. And once you've filled in your if loop, pick it up and connect it here. So if the timer is 0, hide the timer, wait for a second, and stop. So I'll press the green flag now to test it. Just keep an eye on my timer up here. And you can see that my timer disappears after 10 seconds. So that my timer is working perfectly. Excellent stuff. So that's the hardest part of our project here. The rest of the project now is bringing in code that we've used in previous projects to make our project work properly. So our next thing to do now is to create our own little scope. So if you click on the Paint New Sprite, and once you click on that, it opens up your palette here. Now, as you can see, if you look closely enough, you'll see that there's a tiny little cross here. What I'm going to do now is come down here, and I'm going to zoom in twice. Zoom, zoom. And you can see I have a cross here. What I want to do now is click on the circle tool, and I'm going to choose a bright colour that sticks out against my background. So if you've got a dark background, choose a light colour, and if you have a really light background, choose a dark colour. So I'm going to choose a nice yellow. And then as you can see down here, you have a scroll bar, and that adjusts the thickness of your line. So I'm just going to make my line about that thick. And what you do then is you find somewhere around here and you have to draw a circle around that cross. I'm just going to hold left click and I'm just going to draw a circle about that big. Okay, it doesn't have to be perfect, but there you go. So that's my circle so far. Okay, now if I click on this tool up here, this is the line tool, and you can see on my stage now I have a circle. I'm going to choose a different colour this time, and I'll make my line a little bit thinner, and I'm just going to draw a red line here, nice and straight. And if you're feeling very creative, you can create your own awesome looking scope. Okay, and then just to finish off, I might just put in a little circle on top of that just for a nice little touch. There we go. There we go, perfect. So, there's my scope. And your next job then, once you've finished drawing your scope, is to click on the information box and to make sure that you rename it. Brilliant stuff. So there is your scope. So what we're going to do now then is we're going to go and bring in a green flag. And what we're going to do now is we are going to go to looks, and there's a few things that we need inside looks. Firstly, my scope is far too big, so we're going to bring in set size, and I'm going to change the size of my scope to 50. Now let's just see how big 50% is if I press the green flag now. That's about right. Okay, it's about 50%. In fact, I might make it just a little bit smaller. 40%. Perfect. Okay, so your scope, you want to try and get your scope roughly the same size as mine, so your numbers could be 30, 50, 60, it's entirely up to you. The next thing I want you to do is I want you to make sure that we can see the scope when our game starts. So bring in show, because at the end of our game our scope is going to hide. Okay, and the final thing you're going to do is bring in a go to front. And the reason why go to front is important is because we're going to have loads of things bouncing around the screen here, and we don't want them to go in front of the scope, because the scope in reality should be in front of your eye, so it would look a bit silly. So we just bring go to front, so your scope will always be at the front of the screen. So how are you going to move your scope? Well, you're going to move your scope by moving your mouse, and it's going to follow your mouse all of the time. Just go to Control and bring in a forever. And then if you go to Motion, inside here you've got Go to Mouse Pointer. So it's always going to follow your mouse. So if you press the green flag, you'll see that it follows your scope, or your scope follows the mouse all of the time. And we'll just wait for our 10 seconds to be up. And you'll see now it won't follow it anymore because the game is over after 10 seconds. Okay, very good. So, the final thing you're going to do for your scope then is you're going to bring in another green flag here, and you're going to say to the computer, wait for 10 seconds, and then hide. And the reason you're doing that is at the end of the game you don't want to see your scope, but at the beginning of the game you do, and that's why you've got show in here. So we'll just quickly test that first. And there we go. So let's now bring in our bad sprite. So I'll press the green flag, just make sure he comes back, and there he is. Perfect. Okay, so go to New Sprite, and I want you to choose any sprite you want to be able to zap. So for me, I'm going to go to Fantasy, and I fancy zapping some ghosts. So I'm just going to click on the ghost, and here is my ghost. Okay, so let's bring in a green flag. And what you're going to do now for me is we are going to get the simple stuff out of the way first. Let's go to Looks, and let's go to Set Size. And I want my ghost to be a lot smaller, so it's a lot harder to shoot. So let's set his size to 30%. That's a lot better. That's perfect. And we also want to make sure that we can see our ghost at the beginning of our game, which is perfect. And finally, there's a nice little touch in here. If you go to Change Color Effect, if you bring that in for me, not change, sorry, Set Color Effect. So Set Size to and Set Color Effect to. And instead of Color Effect, if you change that to Ghost Effect, it looks like you're able to shoot a ghost. Change that number from 0 to 50, and when you press the green flag, you'll see your sprite goes kind of see-through, kind of ghosty, which is really, really, really cool. Okay, so we're going to quickly now just do the movement of our ghost, and it's very similar code to what we've used before. So let's go to Control, and we're going to bring in a forever. And what you will see here is we're just going to bring in our movement like we did before. So move 10 steps, press the green flag, and that's all my ghost does. How do we keep our ghost on the stage? If on edge, bounce. And it's not really much of a shoot 'em up if your ghost just going left to right. And what you are going to bring in for me is one of these turns. So now when you press the green flag, you'll see that your ghost just goes around and loop to loop, and it looks a bit silly, and it's very, very predictable. So our next job now is to make our game as unpredictable as possible.